Welcome to Comfortable Conversations. I'm your host, Jas Kirk, where we dive into the greatest gift life can offer us, discomfort. These honest yet comfortable conversations we will have are essential as your life is your canvas. In each episode, I will share practical wisdom and personal stories that guide you through life's big questions, encouraging growth, self-discovery, and deeper connections in your everyday life. Today's guest we have is Troy Billett, who is the COO of Insula. Troy is considered a social entrepreneur. You are in the venture capital world, investment. You're really big on social and environmental impact. How is that?
It's a long story to get there, I suppose, but I think it all started when I was 16 or so.
Okay, we're getting right into it.
My dad was a contractor, so the only way of me making extra cash on the side when I was a teenager was to do like true construction work, like digging holes or roofing or stuff that really gave me a tough workout, I guess. And that drove me to think, like, why is the only way that I can make money through like physical labor? Like, there's got to be a way to create value, with my brain, with my drive. And so I started kind of tinkering around with a camera and doing like short films or commercials for local businesses or local artists.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. Where are you from?
I'm from Dallas.
You're from Dallas.
Yeah, I grew up here.
It sounds like your parents were hardworking, like middle class family. They had to work. You started working at 16.
Yeah, so I grew up in like a suburb of Dallas in Irving. My parents, I don't remember them ever being together.
Okay.
So they split up when I was like 3.
Okay.
My brother remembers a little bit more because he's older, but I ask him not to remind me.
Don't tell me the stories. Okay.
Yeah, no, but I mean, the good part of it all was that, my parents were very loving. Like, they cared about me and my brother a lot. But my mom was from South America.
Okay.
And I'm super whitewashed, so like people are like, "You're Hispanic? Like what's happening?"
Yeah, Troy. Didn't know that.
Yeah. So when people would knock on the door, my mom would answer, and they'd like assume she was the maid or like something like this.
Okay.
So I grew up with this like weird impression of the world because I wasn't Hispanic and I wasn't white, and my dad was actually also from out of town, but from Chicago.
Okay.
So I was raised in this like semi-Latin, semi-Chicago, but I was in Dallas
home,
which is super conservative. So it was just like all these mesh of cultures. And so I like to say I was raised as a mixed kid. And I think there's a lot of people who can relate to that sentiment, but it's a strange one.
Okay, so this is awesome to know because I think it really unpacks like when you want to make social impact, that relatability of different cultures. Like no one knows. I of course did know that you your family's from South America. So your mom, what specifically is your mom?
So my mom's from Colombia.
Okay.
And her family's in Bogota, and her father was actually a entrepreneur.
Okay.
So he grew up on a very, very rural farm, like dirt floors, like very Colombian farm, like
in the movies.
Yeah, and so when we would go visit him, we'd like go out to one of the farms and like see what it was like for him growing up, but that actually like kind of sparked his entrepreneurial effort because he moved to the city before he was able to finish his education. I think he only got 3rd or 4th grade education. and decided he was going to make a name for himself and take care of his family. And that's what he did. I mean, he ended up working with investors to buy rural land that he felt like the city would expand to.
Okay.
And develop that land, whether it's for manufacturing or farming or whatever the purpose may be. But he was truly gifted at finding out how or what pieces of lands would be really desirable in the future. And so he also spoke, I mean, it's more than just speaking the language. Like he spoke the culture of the rural communities. And so they trusted him when he came from the city trying to purchase land. And that's kind of how he built his empire, I guess.
So you have this, what age were you like aware that this is what your grandfather did?
So I wasn't aware of this until I actually came back to Columbia. I got to say I was a teenager, like early teens. And everyone came to my grandfather. Like he was like this centerpiece that like
wisdom, like
controlled everything but didn't. But everyone wanted something from him. So it was a really weird dynamic because I didn't know that was there.
Yeah.
Because I was in Colombia, I was in the US, and when my mom moved, I think she was 16, she graduated high school early and came to the US, and she had to get a job at a fast food restaurant, but she had never, cleaned before.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a journey for her, but she had to, and then eventually became an insurance agent, which she still is now. But she was cut off by my grandfather. And I don't really have a clear story on why, but my assumption is that she didn't go back.
Yeah. Okay.
And he was, as an entrepreneur often is very like come and go. When things are good, they're really good.
Yeah.
But when things are not good, they're not good at all. So it's not like a reliable stream of income or gifts.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that entrepreneurship is in like the foundation of your blood. So 16, you're like, labor ain't it? Like, I don't think I can do like this hard labor probably isn't forever for me.
I mean, I was a skinny kid.
Yeah.
So it was really hard.
Okay. So then we get back to you had this idea that like, how can I use my mind? So you start.
Yeah, because my father was entrepreneurial in his own regard. Like he was a contractor, so he was independent. He was always self-employed. And I was like, if he can find work, I should be able to find work. So I valued hard work and I valued grit or putting the work in to accomplish something, but I knew that it wouldn't pay off immediately.
Right. Okay. And what age were you that you knew it doesn't pay off immediately? Like, I feel like that is a gem that everyone needs to like know. Like, it doesn't pay off immediately, so give yourself time.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part of entrepreneurship because life feels so immediate.
Yeah.
But I was probably 13 or 14 when I had that realization because my dad was doing, construction work and helping people fix up their houses and stuff to provide income for the family. However, on the side, he was trying to buy a house.
Yeah.
Like an investment property.
Okay.
And I mean, the house was completely destroyed. Like it was a terrible property. Like I'm pretty sure it was foreclosed on. Like it was a wreck.
Yeah.
And we would, like the wishbone in a chicken.
Yeah.
So after we'd eat, we would take the wishbone and he'd dry it out or whatever. And my brother and I would pull it and whoever got the wish, that wish would come true.
Yeah.
And I remember that year when I was 14 because we wished the same thing. We both wished that my dad would get a house because we knew he really wanted one, and we had no idea what it meant.
Yeah.
But later that year, he ended up buying it, and I was like, why are you? I mean, back then houses were really cheap in Irving. I was like, why are you spending, so much money, like all of your savings on this house that is just terrible?
Yeah.
And, he said it would pay off, and it would be worth it. And he fixed it up, spent a bunch more money on fixing it up. All his extra time was fixing it.
Yeah.
And I was like, when is this going to pay off? Like, you've been working on this for a year. It's pretty much done. Like, is it going to pay off now? And he's like, no. And he started renting it.
Okay.
And I think he was making $50 a month.
Okay.
Because he had to pay the mortgage first.
Yeah.
And rent was cheap back then, but so was the mortgage. So it kind of balanced out. And I was like, this is pretty much a wash. Like, you're not making anything.
What is the $50?
And he's like, no, the real value is in owning an asset and having somebody else pay off the mortgage for you. That's how he saw rent. And yeah, I didn't get to see it until 15 years later when the mortgage was paid off and all of the income from the rent was...
What paid the mortgage off?
Yeah, everything that paid, like all those years of paying the mortgage, now that payment just goes straight to my dad and he can retire.
Yeah.
But, 15 years?
So first of all, it's like, I don't know if like how many people have that like level of patience, right? Because even you and your brother were like, we really hope he gets this house. We're going to use our wish for his wish. And then he gets the house and you guys are like, this is what we helped you wish for. We love this, but what is this? Like, and in the background, like what you don't see. And I think that's where like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a powerful story because what you don't see is like, it's paying off. It's paying off. And like, you're like, oh, that's only $50. And your dad is like, oh, it's so much more. It's so much more than $50 every month that I'm getting. So I'm like, here, that's why I love to like know, like, what's the deeper story? At 16, like, you were already like bred in a sense to like, you had this entrepreneurial spirit. The social aspect and the environmental aspect, I'm like hearing from grandpa to mom to dad that I'm like, okay, Troy, now 16-year-old Troy, he's like, I'm going to use my mind, start, working with local people. And then, okay, how do we...
Because I didn't want to work construction, that, maybe I'm an artist.
Okay.
Like maybe that's...
You're creative.
Who I am.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm going to be a filmmaker.
Ooh, okay.
I was 16. So I'm not saying that filmmaking is bad, but I didn't know myself.
Yeah.
But my theory back then was that the only way I can know myself is to try.
Okay.
And so I tried filmmaking through my school. Like they gave us some, cheap equipment to try to put things together, and it kind of turned into a business. But what I realized was that I liked producing, not filmmaking. Like I wasn't a creative director. I was a producer, which is basically the business person behind film production.
Okay.
But I would have never learned that if I didn't try to do it. And I think that was my awakening of like, oh, I like business. I like management. I like coordinating people. I like making sure the project gets done.
Okay. How long had you been doing that? Like at what point were you like, oh, I like the production aspect of this, but are you still filmmaking at the same time?
I want to say that it was like an aha moment, but it really wasn't. It was like a gradual. So about 2 years, I kind of phased from doing little film projects locally to, I want to start a business. I want to start a company. I want to be like a business manager.
And you're 18 at that point, like that 2 years.
Yeah. And so at the same time, I phased out the film production, which, that was my first company essentially, and started a outsourcing business for software development.
Okay.
Because my cousin, who was in Colombia, and his friends were a lot cheaper developers than were in the US.
Okay.
So again, it was this like opportunity that I just saw where I didn't have to do manual labor and I could create value for people. But all of that wouldn't have happened if I didn't learn early on from my parents and my grandfather, like the impact of financial sustainability, regardless of your like upbringing or social class or whatever. I saw that, you need to create value and the money will come eventually, and to do it financially sustainably. So it wouldn't have been an opportunity for me if I didn't first see that, salaries in South America are cheaper than salaries here. So it just makes financial sense. Like I can provide the same amount of value at a lower cost.
So my question to you, because you bring up financial stability, I think a huge question that someone would have, especially you address, like, you are Colombian and white, like Caucasian. So do you feel like, in the background, the hard work that you're putting in, but is there a little bit of privilege that you're seeing? Or are you like in the U.S. and like even just being able to, outsource in Colombia, like are there parts of your world that you're able to see a little bit of privilege when it comes to financial stability and holding this conversation where others may not have that, like what you're exposed to? Like, I know a lot of people at 16 couldn't even say, like, I started kind of my first business, and at 18 I was like, oh, this is another business I want to start.
Well, I always see it as a spectrum
Okay.
of privilege.
Yeah.
So I feel like I had a lot, still do. I think it goes back to the whole white passing thing. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think I would have got local businesses to trust me to make their film if I didn't look the way I did.
Yeah.
And in the outsourcing business, I wouldn't say, oh, these are Colombians building your product.
Yeah.
I would just say that, we're a lot of, very hungry young developers.
Okay.
And so they were like, oh, this is perfect. Like we can scale with these guys kind of thing.
And were you front, like the
But
face?
I was the CEO, so I
Yeah.
had to be the face. I was the only salesperson. So I used that privilege to jumpstart the business. And as people became more understanding of outsourcing, then I would say, oh yeah, it's in the same time zone. Like that was my go-to, instead of saying, oh, or implying that we're local or something.
Yeah.
Because people understood that was where the world was going, especially like entrepreneurs and people that were more progressive thinkers.
Okay. Well, that's interesting that you kind of saw that and used it to your advantage, although it's like you didn't only see one side of your family or one side of yourself ultimately. Like you were really building and using all of your resources, but I definitely wanted to know that because I feel like when it comes to financial stability, there is a disconnect for some people where they're like, well, this is awesome for Troy, but what about me? What about my young version of myself that I'm just starting at 30, right? And then my next question for you is kind of like, is there a bit of discomfort that happened there as you're kind of sharing the story? You know, your parents weren't together. You are building your own businesses, 16, 18. Is there still like struggle and discomfort that kind of happened along the way?
Yeah, I think it was really hard to see because I would have to go between parents.
Right.
So I basically lived with two single parents.
Yeah.
Like 1 week, it was a very weird schedule. It was like every other weekend, and then Wednesdays I would switch. It was just
Yeah.
a lot of back and forth. And I remember like my parents had to go talk to like a counselor.
Yeah.
And they were like, why don't you have the kids stay in the same house and the parents have to move back and forth? And they were like freaked out. It's like, that's what you're making your child do.
Yeah. All the time.
But it's not even my parent. Like, that's what the court system does.
Yeah.
It's not even my parents that are deciding this. Like, that's the standard.
Yeah.
I won't even get into, 50-50. It's not 50-50
Yeah, it's chaos.
in terms of time sharing. But regardless, I would go to my mom's and I would see my mom, selling insurance, and, that provided slightly flexible schedule, but we would go with her in the car with the MapQuest, like trying to find the house that she had a call with. And, sometimes we'd go in and see these families, and a lot of times they're Hispanic families because she spoke Spanish. So she was able to sell to that demographic. And we would even hear their stories sometimes. And she's like trying to provide these different options. And it's not that any of the options are bad. It's just like depending on their situation and how big their family is. And so you had to understand their financial story in order to even provide them something that would be helpful to them. So not only did I see my mom struggling to pay the bills regularly, it was also all these other lives that I would see. And so I began to develop a theory about financial literacy and financial sustainability that became close to my heart. On the other side with my dad, like, he was always struggling, but every single extra dollar he had, he spent it on a house or fixing up a house. And so we were never able to reap those rewards through my whole childhood.
Yeah.
And so I feel like he took that financial sustainability like really hardcore.
Yeah.
And I think that combination was like, if we could bring that financial savviness to larger communities, then it would be extremely impactful to them, because they would be able to slide through different income levels and they wouldn't be stuck in their current income level. So they could find financial progress if they had the financial tools and know-how to do so. But if they don't know how to do so, then you're right, they're stuck.
You stay stuck. Do you feel like a lot of, because you got to see like so many people share their stories with your mom and ultimately you and your brother because you were there, did you build a level of empathy when it came to finances as now you look at yourself as someone who is in this investor, venture capitalist world?
Yeah, so, and it's so hard for entrepreneurs because the conservative, tough investors are like, why are you paying yourself? Like, you should be giving everything to this idea. Like, you're going to use my check to pay yourself? Like, that's crazy. But for me, it's like, if you don't have financial security, you can't build the business. So my priority as an investor is to make sure the founder has financial sustainability. Otherwise, he's just going to give up. And we know as investors, 95 or more % of founders fail, but why do they fail? Well, the biggest reason, and I think almost always the reason, is not they ran out of money, or they couldn't find the customer, or they couldn't find product market fit, or they couldn't build the product. It's always that the founder gives up, because there's only so much of a beating someone's willing to take.
Oh my God.
And I don't blame them at all. Like, it's no judgment. Like, I've been there.
Yeah.
And I've had to give up before. So it's not that it's unreasonable. It's just, that's the reality. So if you prioritize, like a lot of VCs will say, oh, we're, team first. We believe in the team first. But they're not willing to put the dollars there and pay them a fair compensation, because a CEO of a big company might be pulling, $300,000 a year. But a founder's expected to work on $50K a year, or even $100K. That's 1/3. Like, if they have a family, how are they going to support?
So it's that juggle between survive, and these are things you actually have to think about as an entrepreneur, because a lot of people do literally take, like your dad was just like, everything you had, you're investing back. And it's like, the fact that you said, like, you give up, that's what happens. If you give up, that's how it ended. You gave up, but it's like, you can relate to how and why you did. Like, there's an empathy to be like, I get it. Like, I get it. And like, some people really need to hear that. And I love that you said that right now, because entrepreneurship is challenging. Like, it's not an easy road. I always say entrepreneurship is like, you've decided you no longer want to make reservations. You decided, like, you're going to get up every day, put on your clothes to go hunt your meat, find it, kill it, skin it, cook it. You're really not hungry by that point anyway. And you really can't rest, because tomorrow you got to get up to make sure you have something to store. So it's like daily, this is it. And like, you take that element of like, oh, you ready for dinner? You want to go? Like, no, you take that entire element out of it.
Yeah, somebody told me it was a uphill battle. But when I thought about it, I was like, it would be an uphill battle if there was like, 5 other people around you trying to hit you at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, that might be more, because you have competition, plus you're trying to do something new, so nobody trusts you. It's just, everything is against you. But if you are persistent enough, you'll find the path.
So it's a little bit of faith.
Yeah, it's all faith.
Okay.
It's like, it also helps if you're like young and naive, because you don't realize how hard it's going to be. So you just have that confidence, right? Which is ironic, because as a investor, their lens is that, 85% of the successful founders in my portfolio are 5 to 10 years of experience in their industry, and they're doing something in their industry. So they already have the connections and the know-how and everything to do so. But are they?
Yeah.
Are they stuck in the ways of the industry? Are they really disrupting it? Because if you're looking for that IPO, that $1 billion exit that's going to return your whole fund, then you can't go with the safe bet.
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, it ends up being a portfolio of some high risk and some safer bets.
Okay, so this is good, Troy. This is really good. I kind of want to go back to between 18 and 21. You've started technically, I think it's like your second business, because the first was the filmmaking. Now you're into development, software development, outsourcing. So take us through that, because
So basically, I have no traction. I have an idea, and I think I'm brilliant, and it's not going
You're
anywhere.
young.
Yeah, it's not
You're
going.
naive.
It's not. I think it's awesome, but nobody else does.
Okay.
And so we have no customers, and I'm trying to get into college.
Okay.
My brother's 3 years older, so he's in college at the same time as I will be for 1 year.
Okay.
So I get accepted to my dream school. It's in Europe, in Switzerland, actually.
Okay.
And it's a small school, but I knew getting out of my comfort zone
Is what you want.
was beneficial for my career, for my personal growth, for everything. And so I only knew this, though, because I've gone to Colombia and I'd seen another culture and I'd experienced how people and economy and businesses might operate completely differently in a different culture. And
Yeah.
it gives you like a little bit more of awareness around what could work and what's core to human like experience, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to go there. And then 2 months before I was supposed to start classes, my dad was like, I can't pay for it. And he'd been telling me through high school, like, yeah, he's going to pay for college. It's going to be great. And he's like, I can't pay for it.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, okay. Like,
When did you know this?
and I was a kid. Like, I didn't know the details of his financials, but I did know that he was pouring everything into the business. So of trying to build, rental properties. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go, get a job, continue my film thing, because that's the only thing that has any real traction.
This was the 16-year, like your job.
The
company.
first company.
Okay.
Because the outsourcing software thing, we had a website. That was about it. Me and my cousin were like, we should do this.
Yeah.
But it was hard to actually make it happen. And so got in my car, packed it up, and then drove to LA.
Oh, wow.
I was like, I'm in the film business. Like, I have to move.
Okay.
Like I wasn't naive at all. But I ended up moving in with my cousin, different Colombian cousin.
Okay.
And he was married, or he had a girlfriend that was doing film editing for a show on Hulu.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, can I help with that? Like, I know how to edit and stuff. I'd created some short films and commercials, and so they hired me there. I talked my way into that role, probably because I was super affordable.
Yeah.
So I would work there from, I think it was like 3 p.m. to 1 a.m. or something, because they had to publish the show before the morning because it was about the shows the night before. So it was this weird like review show where they reviewed previous shows, and I was getting some experience there, and I wasn't seeing like the day or LA or anything because I was working this difficult job, and it was like, a small company within a larger company, and it was kind of corporate.
Yeah.
I didn't know that at the time, but that's what I realized later on. It wasn't super fulfilling, but I thought it was cool because it was the film industry. And so I got a little experience working for a real paycheck instead of just trying to hustle on the side. But
are you in college at this? Like, did you enroll? So
this is the summer. I graduated from high school, and I just drove to LA because I couldn't go to college.
Yeah.
And then about 2 weeks, so I worked there a couple months.
Okay.
2 weeks before school was supposed to start, my mom calls me, and I'm like, oh, hey, like we catch up once a week or something. And she's like, I talked to your grandfather in Colombia.
Okay.
And he's going to pay for college.
Okay.
I was like, wait, what? we haven't spoken to him since we like said hi when I visited family like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was very, very shocking.
Random. Okay.
Yeah, very random. And she's like asking me about some forms or something to like fill out to make the payment because I was already accepted.
And you thought you were going, but
So I asked for a deferral for 1 year. So I called the school and I was like, hey, can we reverse the deferral? Got the forms, sent them over, and yeah, he sent payment directly to the school, and then I had to pack up all my stuff in LA and get on a plane like within a week.
oh my
And
God.
then I was in Europe, which I'd never been to Europe before in my life.
Okay.
So I get there and I'm just like shocked.
Shell shock. Yeah.
And then the culture is so different because it's in the southern part of Switzerland where they speak Italian.
Okay.
So they're not as nice as Italians because they have like the Swiss German or German influence.
Yeah.
But pretty good food because they have the Italian. I don't know. It's like the neutral country, right?
Yeah.
And so they have adopted a little bit of Italian culture, but they don't speak English typically unless if they have like higher education, then they might
Okay.
speak English or some English. So like the groceries and stuff, they don't speak English.
So you learned Italian.
I mean, I tried. But that first semester was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. Like I was so confused, disoriented. I didn't know anyone that I was going to school with. Like I even missed like the social hour they had during the summer because I didn't think I was going to like
Yeah.
meet other students before you go and like who
Yeah.
you might room with and stuff like that. And I think I missed a couple of days of orientation too. So it was just this culture shock
Yeah.
that I was like, I hate this. I was like,
Yeah.
I can't do that. Like, I need to go home.
Yeah.
And I remember like talking to my mom a few times about it, and she just kept reminding me like, oh, just stick it out for the year. Like you'll find your rhythm. It'll all work out. And so I went home for Christmas break, and I decided that I would stick around for the rest of the year and just see if I could make it work, and that, you know, the things that prompted me to go away were not like, oh, I want to go on an adventure.
Yeah.
It was like I was scared that I would end up in a work or situation that I didn't like. Like I knew that LA was very temporary and that I didn't feel like it would last.
So coming back home for the holidays kind of gave you that spark to remind you, like, I chose to get out of my comfort zone. I chose this discomfort, and it is going to be difficult, but this is the reminder of what I'm coming back to. If I say, no, I don't want to be there anymore, this is what I come back to.
Yeah, so it was the handyman jobs. I think I drove Uber a little bit that Christmas, like my mom selling insurance. And I was like, I changed my mindset. I was like, I'm going to get everything I can out of this, next semester. And that slight shift of mindset, I had the best semester of my life. And I was like, I'm never leaving this school. Like, because most of the kids there only go for like a semester or a year, and then they transfer to like SMU or some like bigger school back in the States. But I was like, no, I'm going to stay the 4 years.
Oh my gosh.
They had like a 4-year crew that were like the true believers or something. Like they were committed, but slowly they chip away. And I think like more than 50% like leave every year. So it gets like very small graduation day.
So but you graduated from the school in Switzerland.
Yeah, so I ended up graduating, but following that kind of transformative year, my first year, I doubled down on my idea about software outsourcing.
Okay.
Because my cousin found a client. He was like working for a company as a software developer, and he was like, "Well, you should outsource to my, this firm that I know." And he sent them to me, and I convinced them that, yeah, it would be a great idea. And so we started slowly recruiting clients that were typically just a startup, a founder, a website, first iteration of their product. Because there were some, spoiled rich kids that were like, their parents were like, "Where's a safe place I can put this spoiled kid?" And they're like, "Oh, Switzerland." I was just throw them there. So, and then some of them were on grants like me, and it was like a weird mix of super rich kids and people that just made it in on scholarships.
So I have as I'm having this aha moment because 18, the business at 18, you were like, this isn't working out. This is like a joke.
So 3 years later, we got our first customer.
Yeah. And it's crazy because it took discomfort in that to not get anything, right? And then you think you're not going to the school that you want. And all of a sudden this miracle flies out of the sky. Okay. And you discomfort once again was like, I don't want to be here. I'm going to give up. And that gentle reminder was like, no, I'm not. And how magical of you're at the place that you're like, I chose this hard thing. And then, let me also go back to the other hard thing that didn't work, but maybe it'll work this time. That's mind blowing right now.
Yeah. So it's like beating your head against the wall and expecting it not to hurt. I don't know. It's just, but I think that was when I realized the persistence part. I knew grit was important.
Yeah.
From my family, and that, but the persistence was hard for me because I was like, oh, shiny object, I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
And I think that was, especially when you're a teen, it's so easy to fall into things. But I kept sending that message oh, I can be outsourcing, I can do consulting. And I never gave up on that because it was what I wanted to do. The film stuff wasn't fulfilling me. And then I never gave up on that. And the fact that it did pay off after those 3 years just reinforced that, oh yeah, it really is persistence. If you keep branding yourself a certain way, eventually it will find you because that's how people see you. Because I had read some old book about how people need to be something before they can do it. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So I was like, if you do it, then you become one. If you are doing plumbing work, you're a plumber.
Yeah.
But that's what it meant. It meant, if you brand yourself a certain way, if you become the go-to person for that subject, then eventually you'll build enough trust with the people around you that when an opportunity comes, they'll point it your direction. Because if they have no idea that's what you want to do, that's who you are, then why pass it on to you?
But you truly have to be it, even if nothing's coming, you have to stand in being every single day. It's this is what I am. This is who I am.
Even if you don't have a customer for 3 years.
That's going to help someone. I know we're coming at our time. Troy, this was phenomenal. We need to have a part 2 because we didn't even unpack everything.
Yeah, I guess we didn't talk about the social impact, and that was the next company.
Part 2. We're going to save that for part 2. You're coming back.
All right.
You're coming back. I think the one, so before we go, what is the one thing, and I feel like you've dropped so many gems, so what is the one thing for entrepreneurs or anyone that you want to share about financial stability? What is like the one gem if you could leave anybody with today?
I found financial sustainability as an entrepreneur when I found adjacents that I could learn about the industry, but also still make some money so I could survive. And I think that's what a lot of entrepreneurs should do or have to do. So if you do find yourself not knowing how long your runway is, or if you do know and it's too short, then try to find something that's close to that passion so that you can continue to learn about that industry or that building that type of company so you can be close to the action in that regard. And that helps.
It'll take the pressure off.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of the pressure off and then allows you to continue to learn about what you're trying to do. Because I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be a founder. So having an outsourcing company where I was helping founders taught me how difficult it was to be a software founder.
Yeah.
And I think that paid off really, really well for me because I worked with software, hardware companies after that, and I had already got a head start because people would always be like, oh, you're so young. Well, no, I just started early. I've been working for a long time.
Yeah.
Compared to most people, who start work after college or after grad school.
Like you were along the way.
Yeah. And so just, get as close as you can as early on, and you'll start learning where your idea fits in the industry.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. This was a great conversation. Troy, thank you so much for all the wisdom you dropped today.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun chatting today, and hoping to talk more.
Part 2 will be coming, guys. Part 2.